we pause to acknowledge that the place we exist, connect, and create is the traditional unsurrendered territory of the Abenaki people, one of 5 Wabanaki nations who have continued an enduring presence with this land. We honor Abenaki ancestors, past, present, and future. And Katie's going to pop into the chat. Sometimes the auto captioning doesn't translate some of those words accurately, so we're going to put the correct spelling of those in. And then also for more about Abenaki history, culture, and art, please feel free to visit abenaki-edu.org, and Katie will also put that in the chat. So I'm going to get us started and just acclimated to where we are and give you kind of the rundown of what to expect. So my name is Kat Redness. I am the Director of Communications and Development for Inclusive Arts Vermont. I've been here for just under 2 years now. And I'm part of this incredible team and with Katie and with some of our other colleagues. And I apologize, I'm a little stuffed up. COVID finally got me, which is the convenience of working from home, that I can still be working, but just to put that out there, if I'm stuffy or if I need to repeat something, please let me know. And so right now, some folks are introducing themselves in the chat box. If you'd like to do that, feel free to put kind of who you are, where you're from in the chat box. And that's a way that we'll have that and have, you know, great way, as Katie said, to network and connect. We always take a humans first approach. And what that means is we want you to take care of yourself. So I have animals in the room with me. Katie has animals in the room with her. There's kids, there's, you know, who knows what's happening in your world. We totally understand that that may happen, that there may be people or animals coming into the thing. Take care of yourself. If you need to go grab food, if you need to go to the bathroom, do that. You can leave your cameras on or off. That's totally up to you. We also encourage multiple ways for participation. So we're going to have time for questions, but if there's anything that comes up, feel free to either use the hand raised icon or to signal one of us. You can also, if chatting out loud isn't for you, you can also feel free to chat in the chat box. So you can ask questions there, you can make comments, you can, you know, if you've got a link that relates to something we're talking to, you can put that in there as well. What we'll do, and I'm about to do this, and I'll model this, is if you are speaking, we ask that you use verbal description of self and surroundings. And what verbal description is, for those of you who haven't experienced it, is verbal description is an access tool that helps provide the visual information for folks who can't access that. So for instance, I am a pale skin, chubby cheeked, blonde, blue-eyed human. I am wearing my hair is about shoulder length and it's kind of choppy and messy, and I have kind of bangs that come over my eyebrows right now. I'm wearing a mustard yellow t-shirt and earrings that are probably not visible, but they are metallic geometric earrings. And I'm sitting in my sunroom. So behind me is some furniture, but mostly what's in the screen are large black windows that are letting in lots of sun, and then white paneled walls and ceiling. So that is me. And so Katie will do that as she starts speaking. If you start speaking, you can do a brief one just to let us know and give us that visual information. This session will be recorded, so as Katie said, and this will be available on the Vermont Arts Council's website, and also all of the past trainings that we've done are on there as well. So if you want to access any of the past ones to get some of that learning and information, those are all there. Those also come with a transcript of what's happening today. So that's another access feature that we include in this. And captioning is also available if you want to turn the captioning on. Great, I'll pause for a minute. Awesome, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat box what we are doing today. I'm just going to put that in there and then I'll go through it. And so kind of schedule an overview of time for this workshop is first we're going to talk about what is accessible social media and what is the current digital context of that. And then different areas to consider for access, specific platforms, tips and tricks, and then there'll be time for reflection and questions. And so that's kind of where we're going with everyone today and how we're going through this. And so again, please feel free to introduce yourself, ask any questions or comments in the chat. And we're so glad you're joining us today. And I'll turn it over to Katie.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. Welcome back to those who've been with us before. I am still Katie Miller, and I am the Executive Director at Inclusive Arts Vermont. I am a fair-skinned, pale-skinned woman in her mid-30s. I have blonde, brown hair that's half up, half down. I'm wearing big black glasses and a white t-shirt. And I'm seated in my bedroom / home office that has pale grayish blue walls, chunky white trim. There's a dresser with a potted plant behind me. And you might see a couple cats or a black dog come in and out of frame occasionally. Okay, defining social media. So for the purpose of this training, when we talk about social media, we're going to be talking about the big four, which are Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Their social media is really a term that means something much larger. It's any media that people are using in a digital platform that is social. So it could also include things, and the information we're going to give you today certainly applies to these things, like if you have a Slack channel or a Discord channel, Pinterest, a blog, but today, where the majority of the information Kat and I are going to give you is going to be applicable to those big platforms that have the most users, if that makes sense. And social media really is a lot of the information we're going to give you today. We'll touch on things we've already talked about and the learning we've sort of been scaffolding throughout this training series. So social media is part of a much larger context when we're talking about digital accessibility and the concepts we're exploring. It's one corner of that. And one common theme that definitely applies here, and I think it's the most easily definable, and you can sort of see it the easiest with social media, is that digital barriers are very real for people with disabilities. Digital barriers are just as real as physical barriers when it comes to experiencing the world if you're a person with a disability, especially in this world we're in now, this like very remote, very digital world. I mean, the thought that we would be doing a year-long training series fully remote on Zoom, I think even just that switch for people doing trainings. I mean, does anybody remember the day where you used to drive to White River or Montpelier or wherever and sit in a conference room for a training all day? Like, the fact that we can do this on Zoom is amazing, but there are some steps you need to take to make it more accessible. And that's very true with social media too. You can it's a great way to get a lot of information out to people very quickly, to build an audience, to connect with followers. And it's only as good as if people can access it, right? So before we jump too much into information, I do want to share a few links with you first. The easiest way, because some of these tools we're going to give you, they change, I wouldn't say extremely often, but they do change every once in a while as platforms sort of expand their accessibility offerings, is that every one of these platforms has their own page related to accessibility. And usually if you just Google the term, whatever your platform is, so let's say Twitter and accessibility, the very first link that pops up is going to be their accessibility page. And I'm going to share those links now. This is one for TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and it goes into each platform a little bit more detail than we'll be able to do within an hour today. The other thing I want to share with you is something that we found when we were researching and putting together the outline for the training today. And it's a social media policy toolkit, which this is from their website, a shared service of the Federal Social Media Community of Practice. It was put together by the Department of Labor, I believe, like Federal Department of Labor. And it has a lot of the tips and tricks we're going to talk about today, but it also has links to articles about if you want to design policies and some of the more legal nitty-gritty stuff than we're going to get into today. Because as we've said before, we're not lawyers, so we cannot provide you with legal advice related to any of these accessibilities. Any questions before I move on about what we're going to cover today? No. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to talk about for the next little bit here are just some areas of consideration, things to think about when you're thinking about how to make your social media accessible, and what does that mean? Overall, the goal here is much the same as when you're doing in-person programming or anything else we've talked about, where you want to make sure that people have a way to access information or participate in your content in a way that is meaningful and accessible and comfortable to them, right? And it's remembering from the beginning, from before you even post something on social media, that not everyone accesses information the same way. So there are people who, you have a platform like Instagram, right? It's all pictures and video. It's very visual based. The entire digital world really is really visually based. What about someone who is a screen reader user? So screen reader software reads the visual elements of what's on a screen aloud to them while they're scrolling. And if there's no alt text, there's no, there's not information in the caption and it's just like an emoji, they're not getting anything out of it. So it's making sure that everyone has access to the same information equally. Okay, so some tips and tricks. Kat, can you just let that person in who just joined? Thanks so much. So some tips and tricks for social media. Everything I'm going to talk about here is talked about in a document I'm going to link to you at the end of this. So don't feel like you have to furiously take notes if you need to learn. I highly encourage that, but don't feel like you have to memorize all of this. Okay, so the very first one I'm going to say is to make sure that the information you're sharing is available on more than one channel. And that's not even so much a disability access thing as it is just making sure everyone has access to the information. Not everybody has all of the different social media accounts, right? Like I just use myself as an example. I have Instagram and I have TikTok, but I don't have Twitter and I don't have Facebook. So if an organization posts about, let's say, an event or a program that's happening, and they only post about it on Facebook, you're missing out on a whole plethora of people that might not use that particular medium. And the next thing is to make sure that a way to contact you for any accessibility related, any accessibility related stuff is really clear. You can put it in the bio of your account somewhere. You could have what's called a link tree, which if you've ever seen those on somebody's account, it's when you click a link and it brings up like a list, like a new web page with a list of links. Making sure that contact information somewhere is in there and make it really clear, like for access requests or for accommodation needs, and then the contact information. And that's just to eliminate the labor of somebody going to search for that information on your website somewhere. Okay, so now we're going to start to get into the nitty gritty. When you're creating content for a social media channel, no matter where it's going, you want to make sure that you're using designing with accessibility in mind from the beginning rather than backtracking. It is far easier to implement accessibility features from the beginning than it is to backtrack and try to fill it in later. So when you're creating something, maybe it's a post about an event that's coming up. We'll just stay with that example for the sake of conversation. What does that look like in terms of graphic design? The very basics of accessible graphic design standard, and I'm going to put this in the chat box, is that you keep all of your text left justified, so lined up on the left side of the screen. You're focusing on the readability of the text. So looking at the spacing between letters, using a sans serif font like Arial or Helvetica, alternating the use of bold and regular text, minimizing the use of italics, and making sure you have good contrast. Lastly, not relying on color to convey the meaning. And what that means in the context of accessible graphic design is, say all of your text is black and you have one word that's red because it's really important and you want people to draw their attention to it. People who are using a screen reader they can't see that. They don't know that like that's the most important piece of information. So the next piece to this is to make sure whatever text is in a graphic, you are also including in the caption of your post. And if you want examples of that, Kat manages our social media at Inclusive Arts Vermont, and she's really great about this. If you just scroll our Instagram or our Facebook, you'll be able to see every time we post about an event or something, we make sure that if the graphic that we're including, say it says, I don't know, block party, Friday night, 7 p.m., and then the address. We make sure in the caption, all of that information is also included so that everybody has access to it. Because it could be, even if somebody's not using a screen reader, it could be that maybe their phone screen is smaller. Like maybe they're using an older phone and the phone screen's smaller and the font is too small for them to read. Or maybe the image just won't download because their internet is being weird that day. There's a whole host of reasons why. I'm going to make sure it's included in both. And in terms of that language, when you're writing a caption, you want to make sure you're using accessible language. So what does accessible language mean? It means you're using plain language or words that are common and easy to understand. You're avoiding run-on sentences, saying this and this and this and da, 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 da. It's like just short, simple sentences are key. Using the active voice instead of a passive voice. And all of this contributes to what's called a readability score. And I'm going to insert a link right now. This is from Microsoft. This link explains how to use something called the Flesch-Kincaid scale. Which the Flesch-Kincaid scale grades the readability score of a document based on grade level. And whenever you're putting text out into the public, you want to shoot for 8th grade or below in terms of reading level. That, I can tell you, is harder than you think it is to do. I think especially in the nonprofit world, we have a tendency to often write in like a bit of an academia speak. We use a lot of passive voice, and the more of that you can eliminate to just be really clear and concise with your language, the better. And this link here, it shows you exactly how to put your text in Microsoft Word and check the readability scale. Okay, the next thing I'll share is hashtags. Hashtags are the pound symbol and then a couple of words usually. And what that is it's a way for people to search a certain topic. So there might be like hashtag inclusive arts or hashtag accessibility. It's really important with hashtags to make sure that each individual word in your hashtag is capitalized. And I'm going to put an example of this in the chat box. And the reason for this is anyone who uses screen reader software, again, where it's reading the text and reading the images out loud, if the words aren't capitalized in your hashtag, it reads it as individual letters or like gobbledygook. So it'll be like # ACCESIBLE instead of hashtag accessible. You know, I'm not going to spell all the words out, but instead of it reading out loud hashtag accessibility practices, it would say hashtag and then read each individual letter in a row, which is really hard for somebody to figure out, like, because it does it so fast, what they're actually saying. And I'm going to put in the chat right now. Actually, Kat, can you just type in like an example of what that looks like in the chat box? So again, you want to make sure you capitalize every word in a hashtag. And that takes a lot of work to get used to, I think, because not everybody does that. Next, we're going to talk about emojis. Emojis are super popular, particularly in captions. Us millennials, we love our emojis. And here's the thing with emojis, they're subjective. They don't mean the same thing to everyone. And they do have like their own little layered and nuanced meanings, but they don't mean the same things to everybody. Like what I think an emoji means, I am learning through talking to teenagers that it's not what it means at all to them or to other people. Also, when you use those screen reader softwares, it will read out loud what the emoji is. And we have a coworker at Inclusive Arts Vermont who uses screen reader software, and sometimes it'll read the emojis out. And I'm like, I didn't know that that's what that was, or that's how it read that at all. So with emojis, it's better to either like just do it a verbal description or to not use it at all, unless it's something simple like a heart or a rainbow or a paint palette. Like the emotive ones, like any of the smiley faces, it's just really hard to translate to the meaning of what it is. It's better to just say that.
Katie, can I give you,
yeah,
can I give
do.
a quick anecdote about this? And this came up recently because we're all in the, with pandemic, there's been so many different trends and everybody hopped on the Wordle trend, right? Everyone was playing Wordle and they were posting their Wordle results, and that was coming up. And for folks with screen readers who were on social media, it became so tedious because if they were scrolling through their feeds, what their feed would sound like is gray box, yellow box, green box, gray box, yellow box, gray box, green box. It would read every single box that was posted for a Wordle post. So if you had like half of your friends list reading a Wordle post, your entire feed in Facebook became just a screen reader reading what color boxes people got on Wordle. And so it was one of those where it was like, share, how to share your results without really like impeding screen reader folks' ability to get through their feed. And so little things like that sometimes we aren't even considering, because to us, like, we can visually access that information, but for somebody else that became a really tedious experience on social media when especially like every single person you knew was posting it.
I mean, the emojis, it's interesting because, like I have people that I know where and I do this too, like I'll send a text message and it's just emojis. But I think there's a difference between the text messages you send between people who you have like a shared understanding with, and when you put things out into the broader world. And like, I think the Wordle thing, why that's such a great example is I think Wordle in general is kind of fascinating, how there was this shared understanding without anybody ever saying it, that like you don't share what the word of the day is, you just share your score, and everybody sort of rallied around this like collective agreement. However, anybody who uses a screen reader is like, what is happening? Like, why is my feed filled with all of these little boxes? So anyway, just a thing to keep in mind from the beginning, that not everyone accesses information the same way. And that's really what this is all about, is eliminating that assumption. Okay, moving along. Kat is going to get into the nitty-gritty later of like individual platforms and how to do this, but one thing that's really, really important is providing captions and alt text, really, for images and video. There is not a way right now to provide alt text for videos on social media. My hope and dream is that is sort of the next step for all of these platforms. But recently, I think it's within the past year or two, there's a new way for you to be able to edit the alt text of your image. And alt text, again, is the text that the phone reads aloud for people who are using screen reader software. It's also what will load if your image doesn't load. We have a previous, I think it's 2 workshops back, if you go to that website, the Arts Council's website, all about writing alt text. So that'll teach you how to do it. It's important, again, to make sure that everybody has the same information. It's also important to update those. So there's AI now for Facebook, Instagram, and I believe Twitter has it too, that artificially will sort of like guess what your image is of. It's usually not right. So you can have, say it was a picture of me and my cat. It could be like, it might guess and be like photo of a pumpkin with an apple. And it's like, that's not what that picture is of at all. So going in later and updating the alt text is really important. And I can post some links now that tell you how to do it. These are links from Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And then the last one is a blog post I found where someone was talking about this issue on TikTok and like how to do video descriptions in TikTok. What are some ways that people are starting to play around with this? Because right now, again, there's no way to go into the back end of your post and say, this is what I want my alt text to be. I think most commonly people will put So you can update the alt text for an image. For a video, most commonly, people will write a sentence or two in the caption that says video description, and then a very brief description of what the video is of, if that sort of makes sense. The last couple of notes I'll share is along with alt text. It's really important if you have a video to turn on. This is a really simple feature you can turn on in Instagram. You have to, I don't love that you have to opt into it. I wish it was the default, but you have to go into your settings in most of these platforms to turn on auto captioning. And that will add captions to all of the videos you post automatically, which is really exciting. And each one, again, has their own like ways you do it, even within the app. Like I know with Instagram, the way you add captions to a story is different than a reel, is different than a big, like longer video. So make sure you stay up to date and head to those links. And there's a question in the chat. What about when you post a link to an article or something? There's a link preview with an image. Is there a way to add alt text to that? So I think what Anna's talking about is on Facebook. When you post a link, it automatically comes up with a preview. And you can't change, my understanding, Kat might know better than me, is that you can't change the alt text on that image. And the reasoning is because what Facebook is doing is it's actually a preview of their website, and the person who designed the website sets the preview image. Typically, you don't get to choose it. And it's whatever the alt text they set on their back end on their website. But Kat, do you know any more about that?
And I'm not sure. Yeah, and I was maybe reading that question differently. It was like I was thinking Instagram stories, when you post a link in your Instagram story and it's embedded over the photo. And I'm just trying to think through that, because that's and I think that's the thing, is also so much of this is changing so quickly, and like and I'm trying to think.
And there's no way to do that I know of to do alt text on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok stories.
Right. The stories are very different. I think that's the thing, is like stories allow the captioning, which is great. Like if you're doing a video, you can do the captioning, but in that it can be tough. And that's something that we think about all the time, because it is such a visual platform. And like, you know, our coworker basically says, like, I don't even do Instagram, but I know there's stuff I'm missing out on that I'm not doing it. And so I think that's something that, you know, if it's something that you're putting in your story with a link, how can you also put it in a post that then has that alt text or has you know, information about a link in the caption? So thinking about those multiple modalities, those multiple access points. So, okay, if I'm going to post this in my story and I'm going to post a link in my story, how can I also post this elsewhere that it could be found by somebody who's using a screen reader, or found by somebody who can't access that information that way? So I think right now, it's, as social media is evolving and the accessibility of social media is evolving, I think a lot of it is asking those questions of what workarounds are there if I can't make this one singular format as accessible as I want? How can I offer another modality that will?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't even think about the, you know, stories aspect. I was thinking more of like Facebook and Twitter when you post a link. I work for a news organization, so we're posting our articles all day long. And, you know, we are good on our website about always having an alt text on our images. So we think that that's kind of best practices in that scenario, then we'll just stick with doing that. I just didn't know if there's a way that we can kind of level up on the social front.
I think with the best way to get around it with something like Facebook or Twitter would maybe be to just put it in the caption and say like alt text of it, like and then, or image description, and then just describe the image that pops up automatically.
Okay,
assuming they don't change it on you, because I've had that happen before, where it like pops up as one thing and then I post it and it looks different and it's like, what happened here? But it's, you know, fickle. Okay, so I have one last thing before we move on to something else, and that is it's a bit more of a nuanced topic, and I think typically this is the part that feels the stickiest for people, and that is promoting positive inclusion and staying away from what's called inspiration porn. If anyone knows what inspiration porn is, then you already know what I'm about to say, but essentially what inspiration porn is it's the portrayal of people with disabilities as being inspirational to non-disabled people on the basis of their life circumstances. And really what the term is suggesting is that this type of content objectifies disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. This can look like a lot of different things. And usually we'll get like a snowball of questions about like, well, is this inspiration porn? Is this? And really, it's kind of like a case-by-case basis. There's stuff that we go to reshare on social media sometimes where we have to sit with it for a minute and like think about it. A few questions to ask yourself when you're trying to figure out if it is or it isn't is what role has the person with a disability played in the telling of this story? You know, did they get any say in this story going out there? Did they get to tell their own story in any way? What is the purpose of the piece? I always use this example, and it's kind of perfect because it's prom time right now. But every year, there's a few videos that pop up on social media of a football player or some such asking a girl with Down syndrome or some disabled girl to prom. And everyone posts and says, oh, how lovely. That boy is so nice. Isn't he such a hero? And what it's doing is it's making him look like a hero because he asked this girl with a disability to prom, when the nuance there is that he, and I'm using he sort of like in this generic term, but like he's giving up his non-disabled, his opportunity to take a non-disabled girl to prom, to take this poor disabled girl to prom. And isn't he such a hero for it? And like, that's one version where it's people with disabilities are used to raise up the status or create feel-good content to make people without disabilities feel better about their actions. And then there's another version, which I think is the way more nuanced and less clear, which is when stories are told about disabled people. And it's a lot of it tends to be like, aren't they amazing in spite of their disability, or they overcame their disability? And that's when it can get really tricky and nuanced. And I think anybody, if you ever have a question, feel free to send it our way. We're happy to like give you our 2 cents anytime. But know that how we perceive something might be different than how somebody else out there perceives something. And all you can do is just think about it before you post something. I am going to share a link right now from Forbes that I came across. This article, I found it's actually one of the better ones on how, like, what inspiration porn is and how to avoid it, how to avoid resharing it. And really what it comes down to is just thinking, not even twice, but 3 times before you reshare something. Like, what is the purpose of this? Why am I resharing it? What is the purpose of the story? And take it from there. All right, I just did a lot of talking at you. So we're going to take a break for a second and open it up if there are any questions, thoughts, reflections, comments. Feel free to either put them in the chat or share them out loud. If there aren't any, we can move on to, that's fine. And feel free to interject them anytime, either in the chat section or out loud. Okay, Kat, take it away. You're muted, my friend.
I am going to, I'm gonna bounce around a little bit and just with a few little anecdotes, and then I just want to show a couple examples of what Katie was talking about. So first, I found a couple of statistics when I was looking at this. One is that what Katie talked about too is think about like that last piece that's tricky is how do you be inclusive and include populations and include content in your social media without going into that inspiration porn place? Because as we're noticing, like, hopefully media is getting more inclusive. We're seeing more different types of people, we're seeing more representation, and that's hugely important. Like, representation is hugely important. but it also really needs to be like authentic, like faking it, kind of faking inclusion and faking representation. But and also doing it wrong can also really be a misstep. And so 64% of people took an action after watching an ad that was considered inclusive. So like inclusive content does draw people in, and I think people respond really well to it. So that is something. And then when we're talking about people who need access features to access our material, often people don't complain. You might hear a few complaints or a few like, I couldn't access this, but most of the time folks don't complain, they just leave. They just stop accessing your information. And the statistic I found around that is that 71% of people who couldn't access your information, they just leave. They just decide, okay, like this isn't for me. And that goes beyond social media. That goes with like, if you have programming and you're not listing somebody to contact for access features, like often the message that's being given is that's not a priority for us. And so, so folks will just kind of step away and say, this isn't maybe an organization I want to interact with. And the other piece is that when we're designing for folks at the margins, which often people with disabilities are at the margins of design for society, when we design for folks at the margins, some of the things that we do benefit all of our users. And an example of that is captioning. And I just want to chat about that. And captioning we're seeing it much more on videos. We're seeing it in meetings like this, but like I think about TikTok as an example. And TikTok is a place where a lot of people hold people accountable for captioning. They say, I wish your videos were captioned. They're not captioned. I can't access the audio information of this. But there are a lot of folks who say, whether it's I have auditory, it might not be that you have hearing loss, but maybe auditory processing just isn't how you function best, and you're a visual processor. And so sometimes folks do that. Sometimes folks are watching videos when they're in bed at night and they're, they don't want it to be up loud because they've got a baby next to them or they've got a partner or whatever it is. And so those captions provide an in so many more ways. And so when you design for the margins, you often bring people in different ways. And then a while ago, a colleague of mine and I, we took this great workshop on alt text that was called Alt Text is Poetry, which was a beautiful workshop. And one of the things that they said is image descriptions versus alt text. And they said, ideally you do both, because some folks don't have screen readers. Some folks aren't doing that. And so if they can't get all the visual information, but they can get the caption by, increasing their size or something like that, the image description gives that to them right there without doing that. But then the alt text also does that for a screen reader. So ideally when you're doing that, you use both alt text and you're using image descriptions. Often it infantilizes the folks who are at the forefront of that storytelling. And it's about kind of letting folks reclaim their story and tell their own story. And that's something, this is just a note that I want to make. Often we're working with artists, disabled artists, who are giving us language about themselves. And it might not always be the language that we would use, but we're going to honor the language that they give us. So we have folks who really claim their disability at the forefront of who they are. We have folks who are reclaiming words. We have folks who maybe don't use those words. They don't use the words disabled because it, rings true to them. We're always going to try to respect the language that our artists and our constituents and our participants want over, like that's where we would default to other language versus the language that we use. And so that's just something there. So I just wanted to show a couple examples of some of the stuff Katie was talking about. So let me share a couple other screens. And sorry, friends, okay, great. So I'm sharing this right here. And so this is a poster. This is a Facebook post that we posted. So as Katie said, this is a left, all of the writing is left justified. This is mass. This is talking about a reception that's there. St. Johnsbury opening a reception, Friday, May 6th, here's the time. At the bottom, you'll notice it says for accessibility requests. Here's the information. Here's both a phone number and an email. And then there are the access symbols of what accessibility features will be there. And then on the right, there is a photo of a banner in front of St. Johnsbury Athenaeum on that. And then in the caption, which is to the right, you'll notice that all of the information that is in there plus more is in there. So here's the date, here's where it is, here's what it is. We've also listed this event will have ASL, audio tour, assistive listening, large print and braille materials, as well as tactile representations of some piece. Again, we're reiterating, here's if you have additional access needs, here's who you're going to contact. And then below that is the image description. So for this, because all of that is in there. So a square graphic with text on the left and a photo above. The text is included in the caption above. So we don't need to repeat all of that because it is all there. The photo is of the brick outside of the Athenaeum. A purple banner hangs from a red brick signpost. The banner says St. Johnsbury Athenaeum, April 15th to July 8th. At center is a close-up photo of painted 3D mass lit from above. So that's just an example of excuse me, of how we would use image description, how we would also reiterate the information that's in a visual piece of information in the caption of that, so that you're able to see and experience and read what they're doing. So if you could not access that information, you're having it there. And if anything comes out of these series ever, it's always having someone available to be the access point person. So if there's ever anything, put in your captions that there is somebody that they can contact.
Can anybody else hear Kat, or is she frozen? She's frozen? Okay. Hang on and bear with us for just 1 second. Sorry, everybody. Thanks for your patience. There we go. So anyway, I'm looking at the time, and I just, until Kat gets back, I want to open it up. Does anybody have any questions about any of the stuff we've talked about today? Or maybe you've had a specific example happen on social media that you have questions about that I can answer?
Where do those accessibility icons live?
The one she was showing in the example.
Yeah.
Okay, I will show you. That's a great question. So the accessibility icons you can download them in a lot of places online, but I'm going to give you a link to where you can find them, not just to download, but as well as what they all mean, which is really helpful. Let me find it. Accessibility simple downloads. So this link here is where you can download them. You can download them in white on black or black on white. And I should say, if you're into design and you want to change the color of them, that's totally fine. Like accessibility standards wise, you could change them to purple or orange or whatever, just as long as they stay a solid color, and B, have enough contrast that you can still see them in comparison to their background. So that's where you can download those symbols from. And then the question mark symbol, if you have questions about that, I'm going to share we have like a one-pager tip sheet on the question mark symbol, and I'm putting a link to that in the chat box as well.
Hi, friends. I apologize. My computer just totally shut down in the middle of this. Katie, I heard you were talking about the symbols and everything like that.
Yeah, we were talking about where to download them, and yeah, that's where we left off. Was I was just giving links on where to download them all.
Great. I just want to share 2 other quick screenshots just showing a little bit about just a couple examples of some of the things that we've talked about, if that's okay. Does that work? Okay, so I wanted to share this. So Shay is a teaching artist that we work for, a brilliant artist. So this is an example of Shay's artwork. And this is what I'm using this for is that this was part of Shay was giving multiple. There are multiple. I can't click through because I'm on a desktop, but this was an Instagram post that had multiple images of it. And I just wanted to show how Shay did that. So link in bio to bid. So that tells you where that's going to be. And then this is image description, several black and white prints against a brightly colored braided rug in the background. And then what Shay has done is Shay has listed, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3. So you know that as you're scrolling through, you've got image descriptions for each one of these images. So that's just a way to do that on Instagram if you're doing multiple pictures, is that to just kind of list here are those. And you can do, what I like about what Shay's done is there's an overall one, so several, black and white prints against that, so you kind of know what the whole thing is. And then I want to share one more thing, and then we'll give some time for questions and specifics. And so what I want to show here is, this is another teaching artist, an artist that we work with, Toby McNutt. And so Toby here, what I'm using this is what Katie was talking about, is about what can be called camel case for hashtags. And so if we see at the bottom of Toby's caption here, Toby has used hashtag disabled dancer, and both of the D's in those are uppercase, are capitalized, hashtag non-binary dancer, and then hashtag choreographer, because choreographer is one word, so it's gonna read that all as one whole. But for disabled dancer and non-binary dancer, Toby has capitalized those so that the screen reader will differentiate each of those words in the hashtag, so that somebody on a screen reader can get all of those hashtags. And so I just wanted to give those as a couple of examples of good accessibility practices from teaching artists who really value accessibility and inclusion, and how they're utilizing that. And these are both of their personal pages. They're public, so it's okay. They use them for public things, but I just wanted to show that. And so, great. Oh, and then one thing that is something that I want to work on, and something that is, I tend, and this is something that I need to get better at, we don't have a link tree right now on we just have a one link, but often I will put, because we repost a lot, like we'll post links to, Vermont Humanities Council is having a great event, and often I'll have the links in the bio. And we got some feedback about that, about how that can be really difficult, especially on Instagram, to pull out a full link from the caption on Instagram because it isn't copy and pasteable. So for somebody who has visual processing disorders, or somebody for whom that's really, there's a lot of steps involved to pull a link out of that. So it's something that, as I'm looking forward to how we share content, I'm really figuring out, like, either can I link to Vermont Humanities, who has a link tree? Can I do that? How can I do that in a way that's more accessible to folks, so that I don't expect them to have to figure out how to either like look at a caption and write from the caption to figure out how to get into the next. We're all, are you saying that a link tree is better? A link tree would have, because it's up there. So I'm seeing, that's hard for all of us, I think. Exactly. Yeah. Like, I think that is really hard when there's a link embedded in there, and it's something that I often do, and something that I need to work on as a person who's doing social media. So I think that both, a link tree does provide options. I think what's tough is often, like, for us, it might not make the most sense, because, like, if we're linking to other people's things, and so in that case, I might instead say, instead of saying visit this link to do this, I might tag Vermont Humanities, who has a link tree. So instead of saying here's here's this, or go to Vermont Humanities. So again, providing multiple options. Yeah, Katie, go ahead.
There's also an option to, I cannot remember the name of the service for the life of me, but instead of a link tree, what some folks do, this is really popular with news organizations. I think the New York Times does this. So if you check out their Instagram, it's an example. The link in their bio goes to what looks like a grid, just like their Instagram. But if you click each one of those pictures, you can go to the link that it's referencing or the article that it's referencing. So if you're posting links a lot and you're especially on Instagram, that's a way to, oh, great. Yeah, it's called link.bio. That's so helpful. Thanks. So that's another way to do that. I think you could do a combination. Like you could have a link tree with the like link by the link bio thing grid. And what I like about a link tree is it gives you a way to have like really clear buttons and like actionable items for people. And so it makes it more of like a choose your own adventure. Like you could have like Instagram post links, donate, news and events, sign up for our next event. Like, you know, there's just like a way to do it. Whoa, and link bio, Anna says that link bio is $60, we think, for a lifetime subscription, which I feel like is really low. That's great. And you can get Linktree for free. So, you know, that's like a pretty cost-effective way to combine those two things. Any other questions or thoughts before we wrap up and talk about next steps? Okay, well, per usual, I will be, it'll likely be tomorrow, sending out an email with a link to a follow-up survey. I highly recommend you fill it out if you have thoughts on how today's training went for you, because we take that feedback and directly implement it into following trainings when and if we can. So we welcome your feedback. It will also have the links that were shared in the chat today, this follow-up email, and as well as a Zoom link next week, the same time, next Tuesday at 9:30. So what's that, the 10th? Kat and I will be back here answering questions if you have them, just for open office hours. So, and it doesn't have to be related to social media specifically. So if you want to pop in and ask any questions related to access or digital accessibility, we are here to help. And always, we say all the time, we have a delightful colleague, Heidi, who says this all the time, like, just because the Zoom screen is closing today doesn't mean we disappear. So please reach out to us anytime with questions, thoughts, you know, requests for help or whatever. We're here. So thanks everybody for coming today. This was a delight to get to share this information with you on a Tuesday morning, and we will see you soon.